Hello! When I was oblivious to the world of gaming peripherals, I was playing Overwatch competitively with a random HP laser mouse. Then that turned into a Dell Office mouse that I snagged from my old IT job. Back in 2020 is when my obsession with gaming mice started. Logitech's G305, Razer Basilisk Hyperspeed, and the Rival 3 Wireless were my top choices for a budget gaming mice that ranged between $40 to $50. My Razer Basilisk Hyperspeed had disconnection issues, and although I ended up getting the Logitech G305 and performing in-game much better compared to the rest, the Rival 3 always felt more premium compared to the other two. But I always wondered why. Why is it that while I love the Rival 3 Wireless, I can't seem to hit my flick shots as accurate as the G305? Both weighted roughly the same, but I could somehow perform much better on the G305 as opposed to the Rival 3. Through digging, I found that there are many variables that plays into selecting a gaming mouse. Click latency, motion latency, polling rate stability, switches, ergonomics all factor to what should be considered a great gaming mouse individually suited to each user's. The first generation of the Rival 3 Wireless had slightly higher motion and click latency compared to the Logitech G305, which explains why I keep missing flick shots when playing characters like Cassidy. But our brains are great and compensated for deficits like these, so I trust that if I continue using the Rival 3 Wireless, I'll become good at it. Out of all the high-performing mice that I've had, such as the G Pro Superlight, Superlight 2, Viper, and Death Adder line, I still go back to my G305 as I feel the most comfortable with it after all these years, despite higher weight, motion, and click latency. Now that Steelseries came out with the Gen 2 version of the Rival 3, I'm excited to see whether or not this is going to be a good upgrade and what has changed. The Rival 3 uses the zippy switches just like the Gen 1, which is by far my favorite switch out of all of them out there. In the Rival 3, it carries a quieter and lower octave click compared to the Huano Blackshell Blue Dots, while featuring the same tactility. Steelseries claimed that the switches featured a faster response rate, which is one of my previous complaints about the old Rival 3 Wireless. Tracking and motion latency feels fine, although coming from the 76-gram Vaxi XE, the weight feels a little bit sluggish. After hours of trying the mouse, my hand did eventually adapt to the weight. The shell is the same, the battery holder is the same, and from the packaging, the Rival 3 still uses the TrueMove Air sensor. What has changed? Unfortunately, nothing. Aside from the really cool transparent base, the Gen 2 quite literally had no changes at all. In my opinion, the change of the scroll wheel rubber feels like a downgrade to me as it looks a lot more generic, as opposed to the iconography of the Gen 1. The whole PCB looks exactly the same as the Gen 1, utilizing the Nordic NRF52810 chipset and the TrueMove Air sensor. You try saying it 5 times out loud. In fact, there are actually less features compared to the first gen in terms of what can be done with the software. For one, Steelseries explicitly states that users cannot control the RGB on the Steelseries engine app during the time of filming. Subsequent firmware updates from Steelseries might have changed that. While the first gen, you could control the RGB color, battery lighting indicators can't be mapped to any button, or at least I can't seem to find it anymore. Configuring RGB requires Prism now, and unfortunately it won't detect the Gen 2 wireless. However, there are features that are added on for the Gen 2. Such as the 2.4 and Bluetooth stability options. Since the packaging does not include additional USB extension cables like the G305, it might help solve the issues for users who plug the dongle directly into the motherboard. As an FYI, dongle directly plugged into the motherboard is generally not recommended, especially on the newer motherboards that features exclusively USB 3.0 ports, so finding a dedicated USB cable that has RF shielding and adapter is recommended. Ultimately, the Gen 2 feels like it's just a firmware update to solve some issues with performance. To be more in-depth, improperly implemented might suffer issues like motion latency or polling rate instabilities due to firmware optimization. Prime examples would be Rocket Burst Pro, Glorious Moto 02 Wireless, Extra 5 M50 Wireless, and a slew of other mice that, although it features the most updated hardware, still suffers from these type of issues, especially when RGB is on. Timer conflicts might arise, which can slow down reporting of data packages when sent to the receiver or completely neglecting them, hence polling rate instabilities, resulting in dropped data package, which are crucial in updating current position of the mouse. Cores inside the microcontroller units can be utilized, dedicating resources strictly for position calculations, polling rate reporting, or RGB control. Seeing that the Nordic NRF52810 is the same MCU used in Logitech's G305, I personally believe that Steelseries removed the dedicated RGB features to save on battery life and streamline the control logic, which possibly affects motion and click latencies. The Gen 1 not only suffered motion latency, but also very fast battery consumption, which is why when I had the first generation, one AAA Energizer battery only lasted me 3 days, roughly totaling up to 16 hours of battery usage. This was, however, with the RGB fully on. Keeping it off stretched the battery up to a week. When comparing to the G305, the comparison is rather interesting, as the G305 has an LED light which looks a lot smaller, possibly drawing a lot less power. On top of the battery longevity, Logitech also features G-Shift, opening up their 5 buttons option to potentially 9 buttons on the G305. Steelseries, on the other hand, still has implemented a system that allows double mapping of the button options. And as for the Gen 2, due to disabling of the RGB, the battery life does look like it lasts a lot longer. When looking at the Rival 3 Gen 2 disassembled, there's still plenty of things that could be changed from Michelle's point of view. Since the battery life has been extended, Steelseries could opt to remove the 2 AA battery holder and make it for 1. The battery tray also doubles as a holder for the RGB and also the side button PCB. The 2 battery trays both weigh approximately 8 grams, and redesigning it to fit only a single battery could save a decent amount of weight. Seeing that the RGB light is not going to be constantly on, they could follow G305's suit and have a small LED and route the light somewhere that could be easily seen. Or even follow Turtle Beach and Pulsar's method of simply having the light cap on top of the LED light and have it displayed on the side. The current RGB board does feel a little excessive with a thick PCB, and also having its own JST connectors and pretty thick wires. Although not much weight could be saved strictly on that, I'm sure it could definitely save on cost of materials. In conclusion, I find that Steelseries product still has a lot to like. From their advertising flares, color design schemes, and pretty sturdy and high quality products like their quick mouse pads, Aerox and Primeline, headsets, Apex keyboards, down to their keycaps. And no, I'm not being sarcastic, I do feel like their products are premium. Performance and spec-wise, yes, unfortunately, it is lagging behind from all the other competitions, and pretty far behind. Their Steelseries engine has a lot to be improved on. However, I like to argue that Steelseries' whole ecosystem is generally well designed, much like Razer's, Corsair, and Logitech. Their history of mice was impressive to say the least, with frequent collaboration with popular games yielded unforgettable mice such as the Fallout Volt Rival 300, Diablo Aerox 5 Wireless, and the World of Warcraft Aerox 9, and there's so many more. But I will say that the Gen 2 does feel like it could only be summed up as a form of updated Gen 1 wireless. Construction and build quality is the same, which is sturdy, rugged, and amazing as always. Alongside the improved performance, really just makes me question why it wasn't a firmware update pushed onto the Gen 1. Unfortunately, I don't think it's worth its price tag, especially for what it has to offer. And the Aerox 3 Wireless practically having rid of all these aforementioned issues, along with the perfectly implemented NRF52833 MCU and TrueBoost Air, aside from the battery life, and often goes on sale on Amazon for $65. It is the same exact shape but with a lighter body at 66 to 69 grams depending on the color. And with the Gen 2 wireless being priced at $60, there are much better options out there, especially from up and coming brands like the MCHOs, VXE, VGN, etc. Thanks for watching this video, and I do hope I don't come off as harshly criticizing Steelseries, as I really do like their mice. I'm sure their team are aware of these issues and probably feel otherwise. Nonetheless, I do hope I will see you guys in the next video, and thanks again for watching.